September 17, 1947, Tuesday. The mailman descends the stairs of the narrow brick building in Brussels, as he has every Tuesday for the past 2 years. The street has been refreshed by the scent of fresh bread, baking in the first-floor bakery, and the rain that fell throughout the night. He carries 3 letters, 1 bill, and a brown envelope with no return address. 4B, Marie Dubois was 31 years old. Her eyes had sunken, and the clothes she wore had become too large. At the kitchen table, she had written this month's expenses on the back of a used ration card. Rent, 300 francs. Food, 180. Coal, 95. Income from sewing, 420 francs. The calculation was absolutely merciless. She was still 155 francs short. At 8:17, the door knocked. She was wearing a dress she had taken apart and re-sewn 3 times. Each year, as she lost weight, she had to alter the dresses again. The mailman handed her the small package, and she thanked him, closing the door without her hands trembling. The brown envelope was on top. There was no return address. It was addressed using cheap paper with Madame Marie Dubois, 47 Rue des Martyrs, Brussels, written on it. Inside were 200 francs in small bills. Nothing else. No note, no explanation, no signature. Marie held the money that shouldn't exist, staring at something in the kitchen, with the discomfort and terrible feeling that accompanied an envelope that had no answer. Someone knew she needed help. Someone was watching her. This was the first envelope. Marie Dubois was born Marie Laurent in 1916 in a village outside Liège. Her father was a postal clerk. Her mother had taught her to sew before she turned 6. She grew up Catholic, quiet, good with numbers, and even better with her hands. She met Henri Dubois at a church event in 1936. Henri worked for the railways. His hands were steady, and his laugh made Marie feel safe. They married in August 1937. Marie wore a dress she had sewn herself, white cotton lace with a collar. The wedding photo showed a young woman smiling, as if she believed the future was certain. Their son Paul was born in April 1939. Blue-eyed, strong lungs, Henri held him as if he were made of glass. Then the war came. May 10, 1940, Germany invaded Belgium. Henri's railway unit was mobilized to transport soldiers and equipment. On May 16th, he gave Marie a goodbye kiss. Marie stood at the door, holding 13-month-old Paul in her arms, and the child was crying because his father's uniform frightened him. "You won't even notice before I'm back," Henri said. He had lied. On May 28th, Belgium surrendered. Henri's unit was caught near the French border during the retreat. An artillery bombardment hit their positions at dawn. Survivors reported that Henri Dubois was killed instantly. His body was buried in a mass grave outside Dunkirk. No marker, never recovered. Marie received the notification on June 4th. She read it twice, folded it carefully, and put it in a drawer. Then she gave Paul his breakfast and went to work because rent had to be paid. The occupation years slowly wore her down. Food rations, curfews. Sewing work dried up because people had stopped buying anything but bread. She survived by repairing German uniforms through a contractor, paid pennies in return. By 1945, she weighed 47 kilograms. Paul was 6 years old and hadn't tasted chocolate in 3 years. Liberation came in September 1944. The British and Americans arrived. The Germans left. Marie watched the victory parades from her window and felt nothing. Henri was still dead. Paul was still hungry. Freedom didn't pay the rent. By 1947, Belgium was rebuilding, but Marie was drowning. Sewing income barely covered food. The apartment was too expensive, but moving would cost money she didn't have. Paul needed shoes. Winter was coming. Then the envelope came, October 15, 1947, same day of the week. Same mailman, same brown envelope. This time 250 francs. Marie sat at the kitchen table, staring at the money as if it might disappear. She checked the envelope again. No note, No return address, just the typed name and address. Should she go to the police? But she didn't, because 250 francs meant Paul could have new shoes. It meant coal for the stove. It meant eating something other than potatoes. She spent it carefully. Shoes first, then coal, a small chicken for Sunday dinner. Paul asked why they were eating chicken when it wasn't Christmas. Marie told him they were lucky. That night, with Paul asleep, Marie examined the envelope under lamplight. The paper was standard type. The typewriter was from an old machine. The letters slightly irregular. The postmark was local, Brussels Central. Whoever sent it lived nearby. Whoever sent it knew exactly when she needed help. That thought frightened her more than she wanted to admit. November 19th, 1947, the third envelope came, 300 francs. December 17th, 1947, the fourth envelope, 200 francs. The pattern was irregular but consistent. Every month to 6 weeks, an envelope came. Always Tuesday mornings, always cash, always no explanation. Marie stored each envelope in a wooden box under her bed. By March 1948, she had 11 empty envelopes and a growing sense that she was being watched by someone who knew everything about her life. The neighbors noticed nothing unusual. The mailman delivered mail to 30 apartments in the building. He didn't remember anything special about the brown envelopes. Marie once asked him casually if he knew where they came from. From the central sorting office, he said. That's all I know. She thanked him and never asked again. The money kept coming, not every month. Sometimes 6 weeks passed, once 2 months, but eventually it always came. And right when Marie's financial situation reached crisis, 3 days until rent was due, and she was 200 francs short. A 250 franc envelope would appear. Had Paul's winter coat become too small, and had she been saving for a month, a 180 franc envelope would appear, almost exactly the cost of a children's coat at the second-hand market. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Someone was watching. Someone knew. Marie began paying attention to faces on the street. Sometimes the man in the gray coat standing near the bakery. The woman with shopping bags who appeared near the post office on Tuesdays. The old man sitting on the bench across from her building. Were they watching? Were they the sender? She tried to catch the mailman earlier, to ask about the delivery, but the envelopes always came mixed with her regular mail. No special handling, no separate delivery. Once she went to the post office and asked if they could trace the envelope based on the postmark. The clerk looked at her as if she had asked him to fly. Madame, we process 50 letters a day, unless you have the sender's name. She didn't. By 1949, the envelopes had been coming for 2 years. Marie calculated she had received approximately 800 francs total. That was the difference between survival and eviction, between eating and starving, between Paul having shoes and walking barefoot. She should be grateful. She was. But not knowing was eating at her from the inside. Who was doing this? Why? What Marie didn't know was that 3 blocks away, in a small apartment above a tobacco shop, someone was keeping detailed records. His name was Albert Mercier. He was 52 years old. He walked with a limp from an old injury, an injury that made climbing stairs painful. He had gray hair, a thin face, and hands that trembled slightly when he wrote. Every Tuesday morning, Albert woke at 6:30, prepared an envelope containing cash, and limped to the post office before it opened. He mailed the envelope from different mailboxes around the neighborhood, so the postmarks varied slightly. Then he returned home, made coffee, and crossed off another date from his calendar. He had been doing this since September 1947. He would continue until he was physically unable. Albert Mercier had been Henri Dubois' commander in the railway unit. Lieutenant Mercier, 1st Railway Transport Battalion, Belgian Army. He was there when Henri died. The artillery came at dawn. Albert remembered the sound, like the sky being torn apart. His unit was spread along the railway line near the French border, trying to evacuate equipment south before the German advance cut them off. When the first shell hit, Henri Dubois was 50 meters away. Albert saw him thrown sideways by the blast, saw him hit the ground in a way that meant he wouldn't get up. Albert crawled through smoke and earth. Henri was still breathing, barely, blood everywhere. His eyes were open. "My son," Henri whispered. "Paul, tell Marie." He died before finishing the sentence. Albert survived the war. Barely. He was captured 3 days later, spent 5 years in a prisoner of war camp in Poland. Malnutrition, dysentery, frostbite that caused his limp. When the Russians liberated the camp in January 1945, he weighed 52 kilograms. He returned to Brussels in March 1945, skeletal, damaged, and carrying a sense of guilt heavier than his body. He had commanded 47 men. 23 had died. Most had families. All had trusted him to keep them safe. He had failed. After the war, Albert tried to visit the families. Some welcomed him. Some slammed the door. Marie Dubois' address was in his records, but he couldn't force himself to climb her stairs. What would he say? "Your husband died saying your name. I survived. I'm sorry." The words seemed obscene. So instead, he watched from a distance. He saw Marie walking to the market holding Paul's hand, saw how thin she had become, saw her counting change before buying bread, saw her repairing clothes on the doorstep because the light in the apartment was too dark for sewing. Albert lived on a small military pension and his savings. He had no family, no obligations. He lived in one room, ate simple meals, and needed very little. In September 1947, he calculated that he could send Marie 200 francs a month without difficulty. It wouldn't solve everything, but it could keep her from drowning. He prepared the first envelope with trembling hands, typed her name on an old typewriter he bought specifically for this purpose, mailed it, waited. 2 weeks later, when he saw Paul in new shoes, he knew the money had arrived. So he sent another envelope, then another. Albert developed a system. Every Tuesday morning, he went to a different mailbox within walking distance of his apartment. He used 8 locations in rotation. He varied the amounts between 150 and 300 francs, depending on his pension schedule. He signed nothing, added no note, did nothing that could identify him, because if Marie knew who he was, she might refuse the money, might ask questions, might learn that he was the officer who commanded Henri, who watched him die, who survived while better men died. Albert couldn't face that conversation, so he remained anonymous, a ghost sending money, a protector who would never meet. He kept detailed records in a notebook, each envelope, each amount, each date. He told himself it was about organization, but really, it was penance. Each entry was a small payment on an unpayable debt. His health slowly deteriorated. The limp worsened. His hands trembled more. By 1950, climbing stairs left him breathless. By 1952, he needed a cane. But the envelopes kept coming. March 24th, 1953, Albert at the post office on Rue de la Loi, mailing the weekly envelope. He turned to leave and almost collided with a woman entering the building. Marie Dubois. They stood face to face for 3 seconds. Albert's heart stopped. Marie apologized and passed him without recognition. She had never seen his face, didn't recognize him, just another old man at the post office. Albert left quickly, his pulse pounding, his cane striking the cobblestones. That night, he almost stopped sending the money. The risk of discovery seemed too great. But then he saw Paul, now 14 years old, walking home from school with books under his arm, healthy, growing, living because the envelopes had kept coming. Albert couldn't stop. By 1955, Marie had been receiving envelopes for 8 years. The mystery consumed her. She now kept detailed records, matching them to everything in her life. She noticed patterns. The envelopes came more frequently when expenses were higher. Winter months brought more money. When Paul started middle school and needed books, an envelope came with exactly enough money for the textbook list. Someone wasn't just sending money. Someone was tracking her life with precision. Marie tried everything. Asked the mailman to watch for unusual deliveries. Nothing. stood outside on Tuesday mornings, watching the street. No one suspicious. Asked neighbors if anyone had been asking questions about her. No one. The sender was either very careful or very lucky. In October 1955, Marie did something desperate. She wrote a letter to the person sending the envelopes. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you help us. But I want you to know this. This money has kept my son alive. Whatever your reason, whatever your story, you saved us. I can't thank you properly without knowing who you are. But I thank you anyway, every day, with every envelope. If possible, please let me know why. Marie Dubois. She sealed the letter and mailed it to herself, hoping the sender would somehow see it at the post office. It came back unopened. She tried mailing it addressed to anonymous benefactor, Brussels Central Post Office. It came back marked recipient unknown. The sender remained invisible. December 1965, for the first time in 18 years, a Tuesday passed without an envelope. Then another Tuesday, then another. By January 1966, Marie realized the money had stopped. At first she felt panic, then grief. Not for the money, though she had become dependent on it, but for the connection. For 18 years, someone had cared enough to watch over her. Now that someone was gone, she wondered if they had died, moved away, or simply decided she no longer needed help. Paul was 26 now. He had finished university on a scholarship, worked as an engineer, supported Marie financially. She no longer needed the envelopes to survive. Maybe the sender knew this. Maybe they had been watching carefully enough to know when to stop. Marie kept all 472 envelopes in the wooden box under her bed. Sometimes she counted them. Each one represented a Tuesday morning when someone she never met chose to help. Years passed. Paul married. Marie became a grandmother. The mystery faded, but never disappeared. She told no one about the envelopes except Paul. Paul listened skeptically. Maybe it was church aid, he suggested. For 18 years, without asking for anything? Paul had no answer. Marie aged. Her eyes deteriorated. Her hands, once so skilled at sewing, stiffened with arthritis. In 1978, she moved into Paul's house because climbing stairs had become impossible. In 1982, she turned 66. Paul threw a small party. Neighbors came. Marie sat by the window, watching strangers celebrating her survival, and thought about the envelopes. Then, 16 years after the money stopped, the following Tuesday, a letter came. March 17, 1982. The envelope was different. Thicker, white, not brown. Her son Paul brought it to her as she sat by the window of his house in Uccle, a quieter neighborhood south of Brussels. Mail for you, Mother, he said. Looks official. Her hands trembled as she took it. Not from age, though she was 66. From recognition, the typed address was unmistakable. The same slightly irregular letters, the same cheap paper. After 16 years of silence, the sender had returned. But this time, there was no money inside. Only a letter, 3 pages, written in the careful handwriting of an old man. Dear Madame Dubois, you don't know me. For 18 years, I sent you money. For 16 years, I remained silent. Now I am dying, and silence seems crueler than the truth. My name is Albert Mercier. I was your husband Henri's commander in the railway battalion. I was there when he died on May 28th, 1940. He said your names, your sons. Then he was gone. I survived. 23 of my men did not. I carried their names from a German prisoner of war camp in 1945. I carried their faces. I carried the weight of decisions that spared me while killing them. That weight never lightened. After the war, I tried to visit you. I stood outside your building for 2 hours one afternoon in April 1945. I couldn't force myself up the stairs. What would I say? That I was sorry? That your husband died following my orders? That I lived while better men died? So I did the only thing I could. I watched from a distance. I saw how you struggled. I saw your son getting thinner. I saw you counting change. I saw the mathematics of survival not working. The envelopes weren't charity, they were restitution, a debt to a man whose last words were his family's names. I calculated I could send about 200 francs a month without difficulty. It seemed inadequate, but it was all I could do. I stopped in 1965 when I saw your son graduate from university and get a job. You no longer needed money from a ghost. I thought that would be the end, but I never stopped watching. I saw you become a grandmother. I saw you move into your son's house. I saw you survive, which is what Henri wanted. What I wanted. I'm writing now because the doctors say I have perhaps 2 months. Cancer. The lungs, from prisoner of war camp conditions decades ago. There's a poetry in that, but I won't bore you with it. You need to know 3 things. First, your husband was brave. When the shelling started, he was helping other men take cover. He died protecting them. I want you to know that. Second, he didn't suffer long. I was with him. His final moments were quick. He said your names, then peace. Third, the money was never about guilt, though guilt drove it. It was about honoring a promise I made to myself, standing over his body, that if I survived, I would ensure his family survived, that his death wouldn't erase you. I have no family, no children. When I die, my savings will be donated. But before that, I wanted you to know the envelopes weren't mysterious. They were just an old soldier trying to keep a promise to another soldier. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want thanks. I just wanted you to understand, before I go, that someone watched over you, that Henri's last thought, his family, was honored. I won't write again. By the time you receive this, I'll probably be in the hospital. Don't try to find me. Let me remain what I've always been, anonymous. It's easier that way. Lieutenant Albert Mercier, retired 1st Railway Transport Battalion. Marie read the letter 3 times, then sat motionless for 20 minutes. Paul returned to the room and found her crying quietly, the pages clutched in both hands. Mother? She handed him the letter without speaking. Paul read slowly. His face changed as he progressed through the pages. When he finished, he looked at his mother with an expression he couldn't name. All these years, he said quietly, all those envelopes, it was him, the officer who was there when Father died. He watched us, Marie whispered. For 37 years, he watched us. He protected us. He felt guilty. Maybe, but he still did it. Marie stood, suddenly determined despite her arthritis. I need to find him. Mother, he asked you not to. I don't care what he asked. He's dying. He sent that letter because he wanted me to know. If he really wanted silence, he would have stayed silent. Paul hesitated, then nodded. I'll call the Veterans Administration. It took 4 days to find Albert Mercier. The Belgian Veterans Office had records of all surviving Railway Battalion members from Henri's unit. Only 3 officers were still alive. Only one matched the name and circumstances. Albert Mercier, age 69, currently in palliative care at St. Pierre Hospital. Paul drove Marie to the hospital on March 23rd, 1982. She kept the letter in her purse the whole way. She had read it 40 times by now. She could recite parts of it from memory. St. Pierre Hospital smelled of disinfectant and something underneath, organic and fading. Palliative care was on the 4th floor. Quiet, soft lighting. Nurses moved with practiced silence. Albert Mercier, Marie said to the nurse at the desk. I need to see him. Are you family? Yes. Marie lied without hesitation. The nurse checked her records. Room 417. But please, he's very weak. 10 minutes maximum. Marie nodded. Paul wanted to come with her. She shook her head. This is something I need to do. Room 417 was at the end of the corridor. The door was half open. Marie stood outside for a long time, gathering courage. Then she knocked softly and entered. Albert Mercier lay in the hospital bed, small, gray, and collapsed. He weighed perhaps 50 kilograms. His face was all angle and shadow. An oxygen tube was attached to his nose. His breathing was labored. wet sounding, but when Marie entered, his eyes opened, sharp blue despite the morphine, and in them she saw instant recognition. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. His voice was a thread. "Then you shouldn't have written," Marie said. She sat in the chair beside his bed. They looked at each other for a long time. Marie tried to reconcile this dying old man with the figure she had imagined for 35 years. Albert looked at the face he had watched from a distance for decades, now finally close enough to see clearly. "How did you find me?" he asked. "Veterans records. It wasn't difficult. I asked you not to. I don't follow orders well." She paused. "My husband didn't either." Albert's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No, he didn't." Marie reached into her purse and pulled out the wooden box she had brought, the one from under her bed. She placed it on the movable table beside his bed and opened it. 422 envelopes, brown, empty, neatly stacked. "I kept them all," she said. "Everyone. For 35 years, I wondered who sent them. I made up stories. I imagined a dozen different people. A secret benefactor, church aide, a guilty German officer trying to make amends. I never imagined this." Albert looked at the envelopes. His eyes filled with tears. "I never realized you'd keep them. What else would I do? They saved my life. Each one. It was just money." "No," Marie said firmly. "It was proof that someone cared, that we weren't alone, that in a world that took everything, someone was watching to keep us alive. That was more powerful than money." Albert closed his eyes. A tear ran down his gray cheek onto the pillow. "Your husband asked me to tell you something." His last words. He said, "Tell Marie," but he died before he finished. For 42 years, I've wondered what he wanted to say. Marie took Albert's hand. It was cold, thin, bones wrapped in paper. He wanted to say he loved us. That's all. It's what he said every time he left for work. "Yes," Albert whispered. "That would be him." They sat quietly. The hospital hummed around them. Someone coughed in a nearby room. A nurse passed by. Outside, Brussels continued its ordinary life. "Why did you watch us for so long?" Marie finally asked. "Even after the envelope stopped, your letter said you kept watching." "Why?" Albert opened his eyes. "Because I made myself a promise, standing over your husband's body while artillery fell around us. If I survived, his family would survive. That promise didn't end when you no longer needed money. It ended when one of us died. You gave us 18 years of envelopes, 37 years of watching. What was in it for you?" "Purpose," Albert said simply. "I had no family, no children. The war took everything but my life. Your husband gave me a way to make that life mean something. Each envelope was proof I still had a reason to wake up." Marie understood then. The envelopes had saved them both. Marie visited Albert every day for the next 3 weeks. Paul drove her every morning. She would sit by his bed for as long as the nurses allowed. Sometimes an hour, sometimes 5 minutes, when he was too weak to stay awake. They talked about Henri. Albert told her things she never knew. That Henri was popular among the other men. That he had a talent for keeping morale up during the retreat. That in those final days, when everyone knew Belgium had fallen, Henri shared his rations with younger soldiers who had lost everything. "He was better than me," Albert said one afternoon. "Better than most of us. He should have survived instead of me." "He would have said the same thing if your positions were reversed," Marie replied. "Survivors always think it should have been them who died. But Henri would have wanted you to live. He would have been grateful that someone survived to tell the story." Albert looked at her for a long time. "You're generous in forgiveness." "I'm not forgiving you," Marie said. "There's nothing to forgive. You didn't kill my husband. War killed him. You just kept the promise he made you make to watch over us. That doesn't require forgiveness. It requires thanks." She told him about Paul, how he became an engineer, how he married a teacher named Sophie, how they had 2 daughters, Claire and Isabel, ages 4 and 2. He never knew hunger after those early years. Marie said. Because of the envelopes. He grew up healthy, strong, graduated from university, has a good life. That's because of you. Albert absorbed this with visible emotion. I used to see him sometimes, growing up, changing. But I never knew the details, just glimpses. You watched from too far away. It was the only distance I could manage. Marie understood. Guilt makes proximity impossible. Albert had carried the weight of 23 dead men for 42 years. Close contact with their families would have crushed him. Distance was survival. On April 2nd, 1982, Marie brought photographs. Paul as a baby, Paul's university graduation, Paul's wedding, the grandchildren. Albert held each photograph carefully, studying faces he had only seen from streets or shop windows. They're beautiful, he whispered. You helped create this, Marie said. These children exist because you sent envelopes to a desperate widow in 1947. Every life in these photographs owes you something. I just sent money. You sent hope. That's more powerful than money. April 7th, 1982, Albert was asleep when Marie arrived. The nurse said he had been unconscious most of the morning. The morphine dose had been increased. The end was close, maybe days. Marie sat beside his bed and waited. An hour later, his eyes opened. Unfocused at first, then they found her. Marie, he whispered, using her name for the first time. I'm here. There's something. He struggled to breathe. Bottom drawer, nightstand. Marie opened the drawer. Inside was a brown envelope, sealed, heavy. For you, Albert said. The last one. Marie's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were 5,000 francs in old bills and a single photograph. Black and white. A young man in military uniform, smiling at the camera. Henri, I carried it, Albert whispered. From the prisoner of war camp, 5 years. I wanted to remember his face. I wanted to remember why I needed to survive. Marie stared at the photograph. Henri was 24 in this photo, taken shortly after his conscription in 1939. She had never seen this photograph, didn't know it existed. He gave it to me. Albert continued, each word an effort. The day before he died, he said, if something happens, make sure this reaches Marie. I kept it safe, but I could never find the courage to deliver it. Until now. Marie pressed the photograph to her chest. She was crying silently, tears running down her face, onto her coat collar. Thank you, she whispered. For everything, for the envelopes, for watching, for keeping your promise, for bringing Henri home one last time. Albert's breathing was very shallow now. His eyes were closing. Tell your son, he whispered. Tell him his father was brave. Tell him the envelopes were his father's love, delivered by someone who owed him everything. I will. And Marie, forgive yourself for surviving, for moving forward. Henri would have wanted that. She understood then that Albert wasn't just talking about her. Forgive yourself too, she said, but his eyes were already closed. Albert Mercier died at 3:47 a.m. on April 9th, 1982. Marie received the call at dawn. She sat in Paul's kitchen, holding the phone while the nurse gently explained that the end was peaceful. No pain. He simply stopped breathing in his sleep. The funeral was small. Albert had no family. The only attendees were Marie, Paul, Sophie, a handful of other veterans from the railway battalion, and 3 nurses from the hospital who had grown fond of the quiet old man in room 417. The priest said standard words about faith and eternal rest. But when he asked if anyone wanted to speak, Marie stood. She was 66 years old, gray-haired, wearing a black dress she had sewn herself because that skill never left her. She stood at the front of the chapel and spoke clearly. Albert Mercier saved my life, she said. Not once, not dramatically, but consistently, quietly, for 18 years. He sent money to a widow he never met because he made a promise to her dying husband. He watched from a distance, to make sure we survived. He asked for nothing. Not thanks, not recognition, not forgiveness. He just kept his word. She paused, composing herself. My husband Henri died in 1940, but his love didn't die with him. It continued through Albert's envelopes, through 37 years of watching. Henri wanted us to survive. Albert made that happen. Both were heroes, different kinds, but both essential. She held up Henri's photograph in uniform. This photograph spent 5 years in Albert's pocket through a prisoner of war camp. He carried my husband's face with him. He carried his promise. And 3 weeks ago, when I finally met Albert, he gave me this picture. The last envelope, the last gift. Her voice cracked. I wish I had known sooner. I wish I could have thanked him properly. But I think maybe Albert preferred it this way. Anonymous, distant, a guardian angel who never wanted to be seen. She looked at the simple coffin. Thank you, Albert, for everything, for keeping your word, for giving my son a future, for showing me that even in the darkest times, someone was watching. Someone cared. Rest now. Your duty is complete. She sat. The chapel was silent. Several people were crying. They buried Albert Mercier in the military section of Evere Cemetery, where Henri's body would have been buried if it had been recovered. Marie requested that Henri's photograph be buried with Albert. The priest agreed. As they lowered the coffin, Marie whispered, "Watch over him now, Henri, as he watched over us." 3 years later, Paul received a letter from a lawyer's office in Brussels. Albert's estate had finally been settled. He had left his savings to a foundation supporting military widows and orphans. But there was a specific bequest to Paul Dubois. When Paul opened the package, he found Albert's journal, 37 years of observations documenting Marie's life from 1947 to 1982. Hundreds of entries. September 23, 1947. Saw him. D. At the market. November 8th, 1947. The boy needs a coat. March 15th, 1948. Rent day. Page after page. Year after year. A chronicle of watching, of caring, of measuring need and responding with precision. Paul read the entire journal in one sitting. When he finished, he sat in his study for a long time, holding the worn notebook, finally understanding the full scope of what Albert had done. That evening, he showed it to his mother. She turned the pages slowly, seeing her life documented in Albert's careful handwriting, every struggle noted, every envelope calculated, every observation made with the meticulous attention of a man who had turned caregiving into a mission. He knew everything, she whispered. Every detail, every need. He loved you, Paul said. Not romantically, but the way soldiers love their brothers' families, the way protectors love those they watch over. He loved us because Dad loved us. Marie closed the journal carefully. I want this preserved, protected, so Claire and Isabel know, so their children know, that once a stranger watched over their family. That kindness can be anonymous and still change everything. In 1997, Marie Dubois died peacefully at age 81. She was buried beside her son Paul, who had died 2 years earlier of a heart attack at 58. The obituary noted she was a seamstress, mother, grandmother, and a woman who survived the war. It said nothing about the envelopes, but when her granddaughter Claire was going through Marie's belongings, she found the wooden box. Inside were 472 brown envelopes, Albert's letter, Henri's photograph, and the journal. Claire read everything. Then she called her sister Isabel. Did you know? She asked. Did you know that for 18 years a stranger sent grandmother money? No, Isabel said. She never told us. She kept every envelope, every single one. They decided to tell the story. Claire was a teacher. She understood the value of preserved history. She contacted a local historical society that collected war stories. In 2003, the story of Marie Dubois and Albert Mercier appeared in a small Belgian publication about the war's forgotten heroes. It was 2,000 words long. It included excerpts from Albert's letter and journal. The article concluded, "For 18 years, from 1947 to 1965, Albert Mercier sent anonymous envelopes to Marie Dubois. He did this to honor a promise he made to her husband, who died under his command in 1940. The envelopes contained money, but they represented more. Proof that someone remembered even in loss, that someone watched even in loneliness, that promises made in war could be kept in peace." Marie never knew her benefactor's identity until 1982, weeks before his death. When she finally met Albert, she thanked him, but she also told him the greatest gift wasn't the money. It was knowing that for 37 years, someone cared enough to watch over her family. Both Marie and Albert are gone now, but their story remains. A testament to the quiet heroism of survival, to the mathematics of kindness, and to the enduring power of promises kept. The story of the anonymous money slowly spread among Belgian veteran communities. Other survivors told similar stories. Not envelopes, but other forms of watching, other ways of keeping promises to dead soldiers. It became understood that Albert Mercier wasn't unique. He was just one of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of war survivors who carried unforgivable guilt and turned it into action. But what made Albert's story extraordinary wasn't the duration, 37 years. Though that was longer than most, it was the precision itself, the detail, knowing exactly how much was needed, knowing exactly when it should be calculated. He didn't just send money, he worked to save Marie's life. He learned her habits. He became an expert in her survival. This level of attention, sustained over decades, represented something beyond a mission. It represented a life restructured by one man, around honoring a dead man, and the family that dead man thought about. Today, the wooden box containing 472 envelopes is part of the collection at the Belgian War Museum. Visitors can see them, can read Albert's letter, and can understand that history isn't just about wars and generals. Sometimes it's about a widow opening her mailbox on a Tuesday morning. Sometimes it's about an old man limping to a mailbox in the rain. Sometimes it's about the quiet mathematics of kindness, calculated one envelope at a time, across 18 years of Tuesdays, by someone who never wanted to be known. The day before he wrote his final letter to Marie, on March 16, 1982, Albert's last entry in his journal read, "Promise complete. Henri, I kept your family safe. You can rest, so can I." And finally, he did.